Welcome guys to another lesson on Geography Mapwork Paper 2. With a few days left to go, you are almost there and almost ready to write your geography exam papers. With special regard to today's lesson, we are doing Geography Paper 2, and we're going to continue to ensure that you learn as much as possible with today's reading, interpretation and analysis type questions and your favorite section, GIS, Geographic Information Systems. So without further ado, let's get straight into this session and ensure that you get as maximum the information that is possible and available to you. Let's look at today's lesson and ensure that you are readily prepared for Geography Paper 2. Making sure that we will look at oblique as well as vertical aerial photographs. We will look at orthophotos, and remember, we've spoken about this. Orthophoto maps are maps which are vertical aerial photos which have lines of contours drawn on them as well as heights, giving you different types of features on a photograph. Topographical maps. Remember, your topographical maps, you work hand in hand with your orthophotographs to produce the orientation of a particular area. Are you familiar with, do you know the following concepts? Let's look at them. GIS, Geographic Information Systems. Different types of data used in a GIS. Remember, your data is the stored information in a computer. Okay? The concept of remote sensing. The capturing of different types of data as well as data manipulation. In today's session, we're going to extrapolate the key ideas behind these terms and concepts and make sure you are ready for Geography Paper 2. Let's get into the very first question on reading, analysis and interpretation with regards to map. Straight on, question 1. Refer to the town of Harrismith on the topographical map and orthophoto. Question 1.1. The town of Harrismith has existed for over 100 years. Quite a long time, isn't it? Identify one piece of evidence from the map to support the statement. Now guys, think about this. What tells you that the place on your map, in this case Harrismith, is an old town? What do you look for on a map? Because you can't go to the town of Harrismith, so you'll have to use the map to determine what type or how old. And this question is telling you this town is old. It's over 100 years old. How do you determine on a map that the town is old? Simply put, you look for monuments. Monuments on a map tell you that a town is old, and the older the monuments, the older the town. So let's look at the topographical map to identify these monuments. And if we look at the topographical map, I've got it readily here for you. Look at it. Can you notice on the map all the monuments, all the churches, these old and new churches, but specifically around the town of Harrismith, you'll notice that there's a lot of monuments. Notice the script. The script that is used is in italics. Italic script suggests monuments or places of early origins. This tells us that this town is an old town. So, getting back to my question, the town of Harrismith has existed for over 100 years. Identify one piece of evidence, and my evidence is monuments. The existence of monuments suggests that this town is old. Moving on to the next question. Right. Question 1.2. Give a reason for the location of sewage works in block B6. Let's go to our map again and look at block B6. Block B6 is on this map. We're going to go to our larger topographical map and observe block B6. And our question is, let's look at the question, the location of the sewage works. And if I look at the sewage works, it is actually in block B6. Notice block B6, and here's the location of the sewage work. why is this particular sewage work located in this particular block? Look at the location of the town of Harrismith. The town of Harrismith is located within the region of the orthophoto map. The sewage works, which would be considered a location outside the CBD of Harrismith, outside the two residential areas, which would be your rural urban fringe. So the sewage works is located in the rural urban fringe because this type of land use is considered to be a low economic area, and it's outside the CBD or the built up area or the urban area of Harrismith. Notice the gray area suggesting your urban area. Notice the sewage disposal works, and this would suggest to you that the sewage works are located in the rural urban fringe. So give a reason for your location. The sewage works, let's get some space in there, is not a high land value land use. The way the land is used, land use. Therefore, and let's put it in short, therefore, but you should write therefore. So I'm going to correct that and write therefore the sewage works is located outside the urban area. And I'm going to add here another possible option, located in the rural urban fringe. What other types of land uses do you get in the rural urban fringe? Correct. Golf courses, airports, any land use that takes up a large area. In this case, sewage works is a low economic land use zone. So it's not a zone specifically, but this type of land use is taken out of a specific area, like the urban area, onto the rural urban fringe. Let's look at our next question. Question 1.3, identify the fluvial landform labeled F. For this, we're going to go to our topographical map and look at the fluvial feature labeled F. Note the label F, and note it's given to a specific area along the course of the Nieuwejaarspruit River. This is the remaining portion. It is an oxbow lake. Remember, the river meandered. Eventually, due to downcutting, due to the slip-off and undercut slopes, the river results in an oxbow lake. What is an oxbow lake? The remaining portion of the cutout of a river system along the course of the river. So when you look at F, can you see that remaining portion of the river? We refer to it as an oxbow lake. Correct, guys? Oxbow lake. And note, your oxbow lake is the remaining portion of a stream after it has been cut off from the main stream. What has to happen? The river needs to meander, and eventually during meandering of that river, it cuts off itself from the main river. We refer to this fluvial feature as an oxbow lake. Let's move on to the next question. Oops. Right, here we go. The next question, 1.4. Identify the landform labeled E. Let's go to our maps again, and let's look at the landform. So notice that it's pointing directly to the same river. But what I notice is, here's a specific feature on the map that is located in our reference system. Let's go to our reference system. And for this, I'm going to take the map further down and look here. Notice there's the same feature as it is along the river, and it's referred to as a marsh or a flay. Can you see that, guys? So let's go back to the river system and look at E. And the correct answer by using my referencing point is a marsh or a vlei. Marsh would be the correct answer. Stroke vlei. Vlei is your Afrikaans term to describe a marsh. So I'm going to accept both answers. I would suggest you put marsh or vlei, but note the key concept. You've got to refer to the reference point in order to identify specific types of features that are going to assist you to answer this question. Let's go to the next question. 1.5. The southern part of the map is a suitable location for agriculture. What is agriculture? Both crop and stock farming. Cultivated areas. You note what I'm saying? Guys, primary activities. Discuss the statement using supporting evidence from the map. So, the question clearly states that you should know that there is a lot of agricultural activity, a lot of farming practices. What should we be looking for in order to determine the evidence that agriculture occurs? And if I look at the map suggests that you are looking at cultivated areas. That's evidence. So let's put it down. Cultivated land. What other type of evidence do we look for, especially to identify farming areas? Primary economic activities. Correct. Canals, weirs. These are features on a map which suggest that agricultural activity is taking place because the farmers are redirecting the source of water. So I'm going to put here canals. I'm going to further put reservoirs, because reservoirs store water for the farmer during the dry season. What else? Good. You're thinking, guys. Without even looking at the map, you should know storage dams, all related to the extraction of water for farms. How many do we need? We need 2. What are the possible answers? Farm boundaries. If you look closely at the map, you'll note that there's lines that divide these different plots on the map. So I'm going to put here farm boundaries. That's enough answers to get you the full marks. What hints and tips and as evidence should I be looking for? I should be looking for green, cultivated areas as evidence for agriculture taking place. Further to that, I should be looking at sources of water, because no farming can take place without a source of water. Especially on a map, you must be able to identify your canals, your storage dams, your reservoirs, your weirs, and so on. And these provide you with enough evidence to support the practice of agriculture on your topographical map. That's a good enough answer, guys. Let's move on to the next question. 1.6. The hill named Platberg in the northeast section of the map is an example of a Mesa. Draw a sketch, my favorite kinds of questions, where you have to look on the map and through your diagram, explain what you see. Illustrate what a Mesa looks like from the side. Guys, without thinking, this is a section from theory in grade 11, structural landscapes. Remember, horizontal sedimentary rocks. You know what I'm talking about. Yes, buttes, plateaus, mesas, conical hills, and so on. What does your mesa look like? Without even looking at the map, I'm going to do this for you. You've got a steep slope, a flat top. Let's draw an irregular feature, and another steep slope. Mostly found in your Karoo region, your horizontal sedimentary rock. Remember, the top of the rock is flat. It has a gentle gradient. The sides of the rock is steep. It has a steep gradient. Let's go to the topographical map to identify this type of landform. And if I look at the top corner, can you see Platberg, guys? In that area. Platberg has a flat top. How do I know this? The contour lines are far apart. How do I know that the sides are steep? The contour lines are close together. Look at the extent of that landform. It covers quite a large area. It could be a plateau, but it could also be a mesa. So my conclusion is that this is part of the plateau, but we're going to refer to it as, in this example, the Mesa. It's got a flat top to a large extent. Notice the contour lines far apart, as well as the steep slope to the sides because the contour lines are close together. Let's minimize the map, and this is the landform that you will see. Steep slopes on the side, flat top region. Are we good, guys? Let's move on. Question 1.7. Describe the rock structure of a Mesa. Now, does it say identify? Because we've identified it as sedimentary rocks. How do we describe sedimentary rocks? How do we look and what do we see in sedimentary rocks? In this example, you have to describe what sedimentary rocks look like. And immediately, you should note the following. Sedimentary rocks are stratified. Or we can further explain that. Sedimentary rocks occur in layers. Or we can say they are layered rocks. Any one of these answers, because what do we know? Sedimentary rocks are rocks that occurs in layers. And how do we describe it? We describe it as stratified rocks, layered rocks, or rocks that occur in layers. Does that answer our question? Yes. Note, the question was not to identify. The question was to describe the rock. And I hope you're getting the type of way you've got to answer these types of questions, especially in a matric exam. Moving on to question 1.8. Locate Baker's cup in blocks E4, E5, F4, and F5. Draw a label sketch to illustrate the flow slope elements in E5 from trig beacon 3 to the reservoir. Now, guys, this kind of question is largely for slope elements. Your slope elements, you should know them. Your crest, your cliff, your talus, your pediment, right? If you've done them in grade 11, right? Let's look at it. And I'm not going to spend too much of time on this question, but note the following, right? That's my slope. Notice, there's the crest, which is the steep side. There's the cliff. There's the talus. And there's the pediment. Now, what should I remember? These are four slope elements. How do I identify them on a map? On a map, we're looking at Baker's cup in E4 and E5 and F4 and F5. Let's go to our map and look. Here's Baker's cup. Can you see that, guys? Notice the flat top, the contour lines are close together, gradual, and then far apart, especially in this area here, even to the west. Flat top, close together, meaning cliff, talus, and pediment. So these are the kinds of questions that assist us to draw diagrams. This is work that you should have covered in grade 11, which you should note can be tested in a topographical map. Moving on to the next question. Question 1.9. In which direction is the Nieuwejaarspruit River flowing? What have we discussed in previous lessons? You need to see which river flows, where a river flows, how a river flows, and in which direction a river flows. So, what are the useful hints and tips in determining the direction of the river? The way the tributaries join the main river at acute angles, showing you the direction of flow. The contour heights, meaning moving from a higher height to a lower height. Remember, your river cannot flow upstream unless your river is flowing in a water transfer scheme. But generally, your river will flow from a higher height to a lower height, from the top to the bottom. Let's look at the Nieuwejaarspruit River and determine the direction in which it flows, which is 1.9. Here's my Nieuwejaarspruit River. You will note that there is, in this section of the map, the Stakfontein Dam. Note the contour heights. In this example, you've got 1806, 1858, as well as 1718. So as we move away from the dam, the height decreases. As I look further down, the heights are decreasing further, 1698, 1656. So that means that from the dam moving towards the Nevajaarspruit River, the heights are decreasing. Let's go closer to the Nevajaarspruit River. And you'll notice along the river, there's a height of 1602, 1622, 1600, 1547. So as we can see, guys, the Nevajaarspruit River in this example in block D6 here is flowing in a northerly direction. Why? Because from the dam moving up, the river's flowing in a northerly direction. But with special reference to block D6, the river flows in a north direction. So my answer to this is north, which would give me the mark. Give a reason for your answer. Remember, the contours, comma, spot heights decrease according to the direction of flow. So as we've established, a river will always flow from a higher height to a lower height. Thanks, guys. Let's move on to the next question. Question 1.10. At what time of the day was the photograph taken? Let's look specifically at the orthophoto now. Now, when looking at this orthophoto, you'll note that the following takes place. In order to determine the time of day, especially in an orthophoto, we need to look for shadows. Now, notice in the town of Harrismith. I'm going to refer specifically to the CBD of Harrismith. And you will note that in these areas here, especially where there's large buildings, there are shadows. Each building is characterized by a shadow. What does that mean? When a shadow occurs on the side of a building, it means that it is afternoon. The sun has moved over and casts a shadow along the tall buildings. If I look at these specific buildings in the specific area here, you'll note that around this building is a shading. Can you see those shadings? Especially on the topographical map. So what does this mean? The moment you see shading, it occurs afternoon or after 12 o'clock. So guys, at what time of the day was the photograph taken? After 12. For this kind of question, it can only be before 12 or after 12, determined by the shading around a building or any feature identified on the map. Let's go further. Give one reason for your answer, 161. Now, one reason would be the shadows are evident on the sides of buildings. With reference to the topographical map and the orthophoto, suggest why this map is showing a dry season. Now, this kind of question is a seasonal type of question. What should you look for? On the photograph, you will be able to determine the nature and amount of rainfall that has occurred. If there is no rainfall, it is a dry season or the winter season. What do we have to look for? We have to look for water in a storage dam. Now, if I have to look for a storage dam, I will note that the following occurs. Note in this area of the map, and I'm going to take it further this way, storage dams. Note further, I'm going to go to the north section of the map now. And in this particular area, you have storage dams here. Note this storage dam. You have a situation where it is very dried up. Why? Because you can see that the water levels are much lower. Let's look further. Notice the shading of the map. Notice further here, in this particular area, the river or the lake or the storage dam is much drier. You notice this because around it is a white shaded color which suggests sand. So what season are we talking about here, guys? We should know that along the East Coast, it receives rainfall, especially during the summer season. But in winter, the rainfall is low and unreliable. And how do we see this? In the low level of water in a storage dam. So, what is our answer? With reference to why is this map showing a dry season? The level of water is low in most storage dams. And guys, with that, that is the correct answer, and it affords you the full 1 mark. I think you deserve a break. I think you've done enough. When you come back, we're going to continue with more interpretation and looking forward to the GIS section. See you soon, guys. Welcome back, guys. Hope you've enjoyed that ad break. Let's continue with your map reading, interpretation, and analysis questions. 1.11. Now, let's look at it. What is the advantage of the N3 not passing through the town of Harrismith? And if you look at your map, especially in the town of Harrismith, notice the N3. It goes around the gray area. It's around the town. Okay? What is the advantage of having such a situation? It's obviously a disadvantage because the townspeople do not get the passing traffic, so local business does not get as many customers to improve its threshold population. But the question says, what is the advantage? Hence, we're going to look at advantages of not having a major national route passing through your town. Yes, less traffic congestion, less noise pollution. You are able to access freely your town because of the limited amount of vehicles or the controlled amount of vehicles in the town. Okay, so when there's a national route, you expect to see a lot more traffic. And hence, if it passes through a town, it's going to create traffic congestion. If the national route bypasses the town, it reduces the amount of traffic congestion, as well as noise. Remember, your national routes are guided by most heavy-duty vehicles, like trucks, like major buses that carry transport people moving from city to city. So this creates a level of noise pollution. So my two factors I'm going to identify is reduces traffic congestion as well as reduces noise pollution. So let's go there. Reduces traffic congestion as well as reducing noise pollution. What is the disadvantage to the businesses of Harrismith of the route followed by the N3? Now we've discussed this. It makes sure that the threshold population does not increase too much. So that means that the business does not grow as much as it should. So what the businesses, the threshold population does not increase. What else? No opportunities for growth of the business. So, whilst it has its disadvantages, whilst it has its advantages, it also has its disadvantages because local business does not get more population to improve the amount of transactions in trade, especially with regards to the buying and selling of goods. Let's go to our next question. Refer to Virga Park on the topographical map and the orthophoto. 1.12. What type of residential settlement is Volga Park? Now, this refers to specifically your land use zones. And what are we talking about here? Your residential land use zones. So remember, you get low economic residential land use zones, middle economic land use zones, as well as high economic land use zones. Now, these can be seen on a topographical map simply by seeing the size of the plots or the size in which the demarcations occur. And these are the divided by roads. For a high economic residential area or a more developed economic residential area, those with amenities and services, you would expect to see larger plot sizes in gray. For a low economic residential area, you would expect to see smaller demarcated gray areas because this shows reduced or smaller size plots. In this question, we are referred to the area of Volga Park on your topographical map. Let's look at Volga Park on your topographical map. And if you notice that this particular area has larger plots, as opposed to the north where we've got a specific area or residential area of a low economic area because of the size of the plots. So when comparing the two, you will note that Volga Park has larger plot sizes. So because of these larger plot sizes, you will have a high economic area. Let's go to that question and answer it. A high economic residential let me spell that again for you guys. Residential settlement. Question B. Was the settlement built before or after the town of Harrismith? How do we know it was built after? Because we've already established that Harrismith is the oldest settlement. The original inhabitants of a settlement generally settled where the CBD occurs. So it stands to reason that Volga Park developed as a residential suburb after the development of Harrismith. So the correct answer is after. Note, I will explain this again to you. The original settlers normally settle in the specific area of the town where the town is established. As the urban functions grow in that particular town, residential suburbs are established outside the town. Like, for example, Volga Park, which is established outside the town of Harrismith. So that means the original inhabitants lived here in this town of Harrismith. And as the settlement grew into a much more urban settlement with more functions, with more secondary and tertiary activities, the residential suburb of Volga Park was established to accommodate the urban functions that started developing in the town of Harrismith. Let's go to C. Give one advantage of the location of Volga Park. Why is it an advantageous location? Guys, look at it. It's got access to the N5, which is an alternative national route. So access to major national routes located close to the urban center of Harrismith. Okay? And if we look further on, you'll note that this town of Volga Park has a lot of recreational facilities around it. Notice the green areas. You've got to look at these hints and tips in order to determine that this particular area is established for the usage of the high-income residents of Volga Park. What's further important is that cultivated areas promote the breathing of fresh oxygen to the residents of Volga Park. Unlike where you find that to the other ends, there are more industrial areas. Notice the industrial area here, located close to the town of Harrismith, represented by these black blocks. So the town of Wilga Park is located outside the CBD of Harrismith, as well as outside the industrial area of Harrismith, and therefore also has access to the major transportation networks. The green areas, which are residential areas in the form of a caravan park, serves as a buffer zone. This is what we call a buffer zone between the town and the residential area. Well done, guys. I hope you're following and understanding that you've got to look at the map in order to reignite your idea for an answer. And with that, guys, we're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we're going to move on to our favorite section in Geography Paper 2, GIS, Geographic Information Systems. See you soon. Welcome back, guys. Now, we are moving on to GIS, Geographical Information Systems, and I'm going to give you some useful hints and tips on how to handle these questions. Note, there's a lot of content in this that requires you to know your specific terminologies. So the best form of revision is to make sure you are able to identify and explain each term and concept associated with GIS. Let's look at the possible types of questions that you could have in an exam for GIS in your Geography Paper 2. The first question, 2.1, is as follows. What does the term data layering mean? Now, data layering is information. Information that occurs in layers. When we extract information for different purposes, after we've accessed that information from a computer, in its raw form, when it is input into the computer, it is referred to as data. Now, what types of data do we get? We get different types of data. We get data on river systems. We get data on landscapes. We get data on agricultural activities. Each data has its own type of information. And when it occurs on a topographical map, it is layered one on top of the other. So, data exists in the form of layers. Each data set has specific types of information in the form of vectors as well as other type of information that is going to give you specific types of information on a map. So, what does the term data layering mean? It's the layering of information on different aspects in a topographical map. Let's write that down. The layering of information on top of each other to form a topographical map. In our example, we are referring to the topographical map, which is a classic example of data layering, where data sets are put one on top of the other. And remember, your different data sets can include line data, like rivers, other line data, like roads. It can include polygon data or area objects, like mining areas, like cultivated areas. Or it can include point objects, like, for example, your other point objects, which are buildings, as well as spot heights and contours. Thanks, guys. Let's move on to the next question. Name two layers of information that can be identified in block J2. Let's look at block J2 on our topographical map. And J2 is in the Stakfontein Dam. Note the blue area. That is a layer on its own. And if we look further in, you will note that here we have a footpath as well as a spot height. So how many layers do we see here, guys? We see the layer of the footpath as one, the spot height as another, as well as the layer of the dam water. So any two layers, I'm going to put the footpath, which is a line object. I'm going to put the spot height, which is a point object, as well as the stack Fontaine dam, which is an area object. So these two layers of information that can be identified in block 2 are the footpaths, the spot height, as well as the stack Fontaine dam. Remember, your footpath represents a line object, your spot height represents a point object, and your stack Fontaine dam, which is the blue area, is your area object. Let's move on to the next question. Study the photograph of the N3 that bypasses Harrismith en route to Durban. This is a lovely photo showing you a signboard as well as part of the N5. Note, Harrismith is 5 kilometers further on. Durban is 315 kilometers on. If we have to go to our topographical map, that means simply the following. Let's look at it. This particular area falls out of the map, and that means that the person who is traveling has passed Warden, which is a specific area on this map. Note the town of Warden, and is approaching the town of Harrismith and is within 5 Ks, and has to travel a further 315 kilometers in order to reach Durban. Note that this photograph is on the south direction of Harrismith. So, what is spatial data? What is spatial data? Spatial data comes in the form of line, point, and polygon or area objects. It is data used to extract information in the form of vector quantities. So, what are we looking for? When we look at spatial data, we are looking at the type of data in the form of line objects, point objects, as well as area objects. For example, like the question we've just discussed, a line object could be a road. A point object could be a trig beacon, and an area object could be a dam or even a mining area or an area of cultivation. What is spatial data? I'm going to put it as data that shows line, point, as well as area objects. Let's look at the next question. Here's my road. What type of spatial objects is the road? Obviously, guys, the road is a linear feature, so it is a line object. Other line objects can include river systems, and a river follows an almost linear path depending on the topography. The next question, suggest an attribute that you would capture when using this photograph in a GIS. Let's look closely at this photograph. What is an attribute data? An attribute data is the data that describes a type of object. We have established that the N5 is a line object, but what attributes does it have? It is called the N5 because it's a national road. Different types of roads are classified according to its status. In this example, we describe this linear feature or line object as the N5. We have given it an attribute of N5. We have further given it an attribute of national road. So what are we doing? We are describing this type of line object. We've established that the line object is a road. Now when we call it the N5, we are giving it an attribute. When we call it a national road, we are giving it an attribute. And this is what we call attribute data. It's descriptive data that explains to you the type of point, line, or area object that we are working with. So, suggest an attribute that you would capture. I would capture the N5 or national route. This would better assist me in order to ensure that now we are able to attribute this data as a line object, beyond it being a line object, to a national route. Let's go to the next question. Question 2.4. Study the map which shows the proposed location of the Wild Horses Lodge to the southwest of Harrismith. Now this is a rough sketch. It's basically points, nodes, and you will be able to use this to determine different aspects, and it's a specific type of GIS. If I look at it, this particular diagram has the N3 as a linear object, but it shows you points of location like Johannesburg, which is to the north, Harrismith, which is your central point, and Durban. It further shows you the N5 and the location of a proposed Wild Horses Lodge, which is today existing towards the town of Harrismith to the southwest. So let's look at the type of questions. Name 2 data layers visible on the map. And there are many. There's line objects. There's as well a Sterkfontein Dam, which is an area object. The Wild Horses Lodge, which is also an area object, as well as the different points and nodes. So I'm going to call these, the 2 data layers are roads, as well as dams, which is a Sterkfontein Dam. Further, buildings, because it's showing us different villages as well as lodges. It's also using different type of attributes to see different towns. So towns or villages. So the visible data layers include all these points like Bethlehem, Clarence, as well as Kestrel, Harrismith, which suggests that that layer is showing us the towns. The N5, N3, R712 is a roads layer, which shows us different types of roads on this particular GIS, as well as we have the Wild Horses and the Sterkfontein Dam, which shows us a water feature, as well as another layer showing us buildings. Let's look at the next question. GIS is useful in planning the location of resorts such as the Wild Horses Lodge. Explain how local authorities can be assisted in using the GIS to plan such land uses. So we have used a GIS like the one in this diagram to explain that this is the type of GIS that is used to locate a recreational kind of area like a lodge. The question simply says, how do local authorities be assisted in planning such land uses? Now, when we plan such land uses, we have to take cognizance of surrounding towns and its populations. So a GIS gives you the idea that here is a group of people living, and these kinds of people support the functioning activities that occur. The location of the dam is important in a GIS because it's going to provide the recreational activities as well as sightseeing activities for people who will live in the lodge. The access to the major national routes allow you to see the amount of passing traffic and allows access to people wishing to travel a specific route to reach this kinds of lodge. There are various different ways. It also creates buffer zones to show you the specific area that is used to occupy the lodge and where else other types of land uses are existent. So these kinds of GISs ensure that they are used effectively in order to plan better for the growth and development of a town like Harrismith. Remember guys, you have to look at the topographical map, and in this case we are given a diagram in order to ensure that we further assisted in order to locate how GIS is used in order to improve a town like Harrismith. Let's move on to the next question. The next type of GIS we will use is a graph. Study the graph below, which shows the weather conditions of Harrismith. Believe it or not, guys, this may seem to you like being climatology, but it's actually a GIS. It's a geographical information system about what? About a specific town like Harrismith. We are using graphical information, which is helping us better understand the town of Harrismith. Geographical information systems help us better in our decision making. So why is it important to know the climate of a region? So that when we book at this lodge in order to enjoy a nice holiday after our matric exam, you will be able to determine what type of weather is being experienced in this particular lodge. Let's look at this graph and let's look at what are the different types of questions that you'll get. What is attribute data? As we've established, I want you to reinforce this concept. Attribute data is descriptive data. It describes the type of spatial objects that we are dealing with. So, what is attribute data? Data that describes spatial objects. Let's look at the next question. Suggest two attribute data provided by the graph. Look closely at this graph, guys. If you look at it, it says meteogram for Harrismith, meteorological, meaning weather, for Harrismith, which is our topographical map that we're dealing with, the town in the Free State, the next 24 hours, right? Notice 48 hours is a 2-day period. The question is, suggest two attributes provided by the graph. What does the attributes provide? What descriptive data is located in this particular graph? How do we do this? Notice here. Correct. Time. What other data? Notice here, this particular line. Correct. Temperature. Temperature describes the state of moisture, a level of moisture in the atmosphere. What about the green line? It's showing you cloud cover, describing the upper atmosphere. What else? It's also showing you the level of sunshine. And these are the different types of attributes that you can extract from this graph in order to determine what kind of environment to describe as Harrismith. And this information will be useful for a specific period in order to assist us to have better decision making. Explain how agricultural activities in Harrismith can benefit from these attributes. So we know there's temperature, there's cloud cover, there's amount of sunlight. All these decisions help us better understand the times, especially for the agricultural activities of farming, when to farm, when to plant our crops, when to harvest our crops, because this GIS of graphical information, of temperatures, of cloud cover will assist us in determining the level of heat in the atmosphere, the level of evaporation rates, how to use water sparingly on our farming environments. Do you see, guys? The decision making which you would see beyond geography is actually geographical information systems that do not stretch beyond the subject, and your knowledge has to encompass these different types of information. And with that, guys, we have come to the end of our session. What you should know is that we've covered aspects of calculations, as well as we've covered aspects of reading and interpretation, as well as GIS. This information is going to assist you to better prepare for your geographical information systems, as well as geography paper 2. So good luck, guys. Remember the key concept here. For everything in geography paper 2, it's about practice, practice, practice. That will lead you to perfection. Good luck, guys, and all the best for the final exam.